Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive? Today we're going to be tackling the January 6th Select Committee report.
Okay.
This thing really gets into one of the most significant events in recent American history.
Really?
The attack on the U.S. Capitol. Now, I know this report is pretty dense.
Yeah.
It's a long one.
Yeah, it is.
But don't worry.
Right.
We're here to help make sense of it all.
Absolutely.
We're going to pull out the most impactful findings and break them
Nailed it.
down for you.
We're going to be focusing on the facts.
Yeah.
Like,
The evidence. Let's start with what the report calls the big lie.
okay.
You know, this whole idea that the 2020 election was stolen.
Right.
The report reveals that this wasn't some spontaneous reaction,
Mm-hmm.
just something that kind of bubbled up after the election results.
No.
It's a carefully constructed narrative.
Yeah, a narrative that they were building even before the election took place.
Yeah. And the report highlights something called the Red Mirage.
You're right.
And this was where early election results
Yeah. You remember how those early results
favored Trump.
favored Trump?
Yeah.
And that was due to in-person voting patterns.
Right.
And that was really intentionally exploited
Yeah.
to set the stage for these false claims of election fraud.
Yeah. They used that to build this foundation
Exactly.
that allowed them to make these claims.
That's right.
The report cites communications with Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch,
Uh-huh.
suggesting that Trump actually planned to declare victory on election night,
Regardless of the outcome.
no matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah.
And weeks before the election, Steve Bannon had even predicted this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it seems like they were setting the stage for this narrative well in advance.
It was all planned.
It really was.
And what's striking is they kept going with this narrative even when they knew it wasn't true.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Even Rudy Giuliani,
Yeah.
during his testimony, admitted they didn't have the evidence.
Yeah, they just didn't have the evidence of widespread fraud to overturn the election results. And that's something that's really important for people to remember.
Yeah, why do you think they kept pushing this?
It's a great question.
Even when they knew it was baseless, what was their strategy?
It's really fascinating. The report doesn't come right out and say what their motivation was,
Okay.
but it does show the power of repeating a story over and over again
She's keep repeating it.
to the point where people start to believe it even without proof.
Right.
So maybe they thought if they said it enough, people will just accept it as truth.
Wow. And that relentless repetition of the big lie fueled this intense pressure campaign on then Vice President Mike Pence to get him to try to overturn the election result.
Absolutely. The report goes into detail about this pressure campaign and especially about the legal theories that John Eastman was putting forward,
Yeah.
which legal experts over and over again said were completely illegal and dangerous.
Dangerous.
Yeah, Eastman was basically saying that Pence had the power all by himself to decide who the president was.
So he's saying Pence could just choose.
That's
Wow. But Pence refused, right?
Oh, yeah, he totally stood his ground.
Good for him.
The report even quotes some of Pence's public statements where he clearly says that he did not have the right to overturn the election.
Yeah.
And he even called that idea un-American.
I like that guy.
Yeah.
But the pressure on Pence didn't just come from, Trump and his inner circle.
No, not at all.
It went way beyond that.
Way beyond that. The report talks about how the crowd, who were all fired up by the big lie, turned on Pence.
Oh, wow.
They were chanting threats,
No.
calling him a traitor.
That's scary.
It was a very dangerous situation, and it really highlights how directly Trump's words led to the anger of that mob.
It's chilling to think about the kind of danger Pence was in
Yeah.
because of this baseless narrative.
Yeah, it really is.
And the report then kind of shifts its focus to Trump's attempts to influence the Department of Justice.
Right.
What did the committee find there?
They found that Trump was really working hard to use the DOJ to back up his claims.
So he was trying to use the Justice Department.
Exactly. He was putting a lot of pressure on officials like the acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and Richard Donahue
To do what?
to go after these baseless allegations.
Wow.
There's even this story in the report where Rosen and Donahue went through and debunked all these crazy conspiracy theories, one by one.
And then what?
And then Trump just dismissed all their work by saying, you guys may not be following the internet the way I do.
What? So he's saying he trusts...
Random stuff he sees online.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, it is.
What happened because of all this pressure on the DOJ?
Well, it almost caused a major constitutional crisis.
Really?
Yeah, Trump even tried to replace Rosen with Jeffrey Clark.
Who's that?
Clark was someone who was loyal to Trump,
Okay.
and he was willing to send a letter telling states to go ahead and certify fake electors.
Oh, wow.
It was a whole scheme that was only stopped because all the top officials at the DOJ threatened to quit.
That's intense.
It really was.
So we've got the big lie as the groundwork.
Right.
Then the pressure on Pence.
Yeah.
And the attempts to use the DOJ, all creating this really tense situation.
Very volatile situation.
And then comes Trump's December 19th tweet.
That tweet was a turning point.
Tell me about it.
It said, "Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there, will be wild."
I remember that tweet.
And the report really emphasizes how this one message got his supporters all riled up.
Oh, yeah.
And it became this focal point for extremist groups.
So that tweet was like a catalyst, bringing all these different groups together.
Some of them with really dangerous intentions.
What kinds of groups are we talking about?
The report gives specific examples of how different groups like the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and QAnon followers
Oh, wow. Those are some intense groups.
responded to Trump's tweet and started getting ready for January 6th.
And they weren't just, vaguely talking about it.
No, they were openly discussing bringing weapons, storming the Capitol,
Wow.
even invoking the Insurrection Act.
This was serious.
It really was. So for some of these groups,
Yeah.
January 6th was never going to be a peaceful protest.
Absolutely not.
So you've got this mix of groups.
All heading to D.C.
Then what happens on January 6th itself?
Well, the report has a whole chapter called 187 Minutes of Dereliction.
What's that about?
It looks at the time between Trump's speech at the Ellipse and when he finally told the rioters to go home.
Okay.
And the big question the report tries to answer is, what was Trump doing while the Capitol was under attack?
That's the big question.
Yeah, and what the committee found is pretty damning.
Really?
They paint a picture of Trump just refusing to do anything for hours.
As the violence is happening?
Yes, as the violence was happening.
Why?
Even though people were begging him to step in.
Who was begging him?
Advisors, family members.
Wow.
Even Fox News commentators.
No way.
It seems like he was totally focused on trying to delay the electoral vote count.
Okay.
He was even calling senators to pressure them.
While the attack was going on?
Yes, but he didn't seem to care at all about the people in the Capitol.
So he was worried about overturning the election,
Yeah,
but not about the people in danger.
that's right.
What was his attitude like during all this?
There's testimony from White House counsel Pat Cipollone,
Okay.
who describes people desperately trying to get Trump to call off the violence. But he just kept focusing on his own goals.
Wow.
There's also this really disturbing testimony from Cassidy Hutchinson,
Okay.
who overheard Trump say something like, "I don't care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the Fing mags away. Let my people in."
He said that. That's what Hutchinson says she heard.
That's scary.
It really gives you a look into Trump's mindset at that time.
Yeah, what does that tell us about what he understood about the potential for violence that day?
It makes you wonder if he really understood how serious the situation was.
Yeah.
And how willing he was to do anything to stop it. The report seems to say that he was watching the whole thing on TV.
While everyone around him was begging him to do something.
So maybe he was encouraging the violence?
It's possible, or at the very least, he didn't care if people got hurt.
As long as his supporters were fighting for him?
Exactly.
That's messed up.
It is.
So after hours of doing nothing,
yeah.
he finally tells the rioters to go home.
Right.
What does the report say about that message?
Even that message was carefully worded.
Really?
It apparently took some convincing to get Trump to include the phrase, "stay peaceful."
So he didn't even want to say that.
It seems like he couldn't bring himself to fully condemn the violence that he had caused.
Wow. So the report really goes through the events of January 6th,
Step by step.
the lead up to the attack,
Yeah.
and the aftermath.
It's all in there.
What does it all mean?
That's the big question, isn't it?
What are the takeaways for everyone listening?
Well, the report doesn't hold back when it comes to pointing fingers.
Oh, okay.
It lists potential criminal charges against Trump and some of his allies. Things like obstruction of an official proceeding and conspiracy to defraud the United States.
Yeah.
And it also brings up concerns about witness tampering and the spread of false narratives.
So they're saying Trump and his people might have broken the law?
That's what the report suggests.
Is there anything else important in the report?
Yeah, they also talk a lot about the role of social media.
Oh, yeah.
How platforms like Facebook and Twitter were used to spread misinformation, organize the attack,
Right.
and even encourage violence.
So social media played a big part.
It really did.
It's a reminder that these platforms have a lot of power.
Yeah.
And when they're used for the wrong reasons, The consequences can be serious.
Absolutely. And it's a really good reminder that we all need to be really careful about the information we consume.
Especially online.
Especially online these days, yeah.
Yeah, what about the report's recommendations? Anything stand out to you there?
Yeah, one thing that's interesting is that they go beyond just holding specific people accountable.
Yeah.
They also talk about ways to prevent this kind of thing from happening again.
Like what?
Things like changing election laws.
Oh, okay.
And improving security measures.
Right, so they're not just focused on the past.
Exactly. They're looking ahead, too.
They want to make sure something like this never happens again.
That's right.
And we have to remember, this isn't just history, you know?
Yeah, you're right.
The events of January 6th, they're still affecting American politics and society.
Oh, absolutely.
We're seeing a real lack of trust in institutions.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much political polarization.
Yeah.
And it feels like violence is becoming more and more normal as a political tool.
It's like these trends were already happening.
Right.
January 6th just sped them up.
It's like a wound that's not healing.
Yeah, a wound that keeps getting reopened.
And we're still dealing with the fallout.
It's a really difficult situation.
And it's worrying that the report also talks about people trying to twist the truth about January 6th.
Yeah, it's concerning.
Even questioning the honesty of some of the witnesses.
Right. They specifically point to Mark Meadows in his book as an example.
Really?
Yeah, they're saying he's pushing a false narrative.
So even now, people are trying to change the story of what happened.
It's still happening, and that's why this report is so important.
Right, it gives us the facts.
Exactly. It's based on evidence, so it can challenge those attempts to rewrite history.
It reminds us that the truth matters.
Absolutely.
Facts matter.
Especially when we're talking about something as important as our elections.
Yeah, and the peaceful transfer of power.
It's the foundation of our democracy.
So how do we move forward as a country?
It starts with being informed, you know? It starts with being informed, you know?
Okay.
Reading the full report is a good place to start.
Right, but also just having conversations like this.
Exactly.
Sharing what we've learned and calling out misinformation when we see it.
We have to hold our leaders accountable.
Yeah, and be active in our democracy.
Not just sit back and watch.
This isn't just a political issue.
No, it's not.
It's about protecting our system of government.
The foundation of our country.
One thing that really hit me was how the report talks about regular people getting caught up in all of this.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that.
Swept away by all the misinformation and anger.
Yeah, the report really puts a human face on the events.
Right, it shows how individuals...
who probably never thought they'd do something like this.
Oh.
You're convinced they were actually being patriotic.
They thought they were saving the country.
And that's a reminder that we're all vulnerable to these kinds of narratives.
Especially when they play on our fears.
Exactly, when they tap into our deepest anxieties.
Makes you wonder what might have been different
if
those people had had access to accurate information.
Right, or different perspectives.
This shows how important education is.
Absolutely.
And critical thinking. And media literacy.
In this age of information overload.
Where it's so easy to manipulate information.
Yeah, we need to be careful about what we believe.
We need to question everything.
Especially online.
And be open to talking to people who see things differently than we do.
Respectful dialogue is crucial.
We have to find ways to communicate with each other again.
And listen to each other.
And find common ground.
Otherwise, we're just going to keep drifting further apart.
Which is exactly what the people who want to divide us want.
Exactly.
The report's recommendations give us some ideas for how to move forward.
Yeah, like strengthening election security.
Okay.
Reforming campaign finance laws.
Well,
holding people accountable for spreading misinformation.
Those are all good steps.
Concrete steps we can take to protect our democracy.
But it's not just about making changes to the system.
Right.
We also have to address the root causes of all this polarization and extremism.
Like economic inequality.
Yeah.
Social injustice.
Right.
Lack of access to education and opportunity.
We need to create a society where everyone feels like they belong.
Yeah, where everyone feels heard and represented.
Because when people feel alienated and hopeless,
they're more likely to fall for these extremist ideas.
And we can't forget about the role of leadership in all of this.
Yeah, that's crucial.
This report shows what happens when leaders don't defend the truth, when they don't uphold the rule of law,
right?
When they don't try to bring the country together.
We need leaders who will put those principles first.
Before their own personal agendas.
Absolutely.
It's a cautionary tale.
For sure.
But it's also a call to action.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we all have a responsibility to shape the future of our democracy.
It's up to all of us.
It's crazy how even with people in his inner circle telling him to back down, he just kept pushing it.
It makes you wonder how someone with that much power can be so stubborn, so focused on what they want.
Yeah, it's like he was living in a different world.
A world where facts and evidence didn't matter.
Exactly. And that's what makes this committee and this report so important.
It brings us back to reality, shows us what really happened.
Based on facts.
Yeah, it cuts through all the noise and the lies that are still out there about this event.
It's like a shining light of truth.
And it's a reminder that we can't just sit back and assume our democracy will be okay.
We have to be willing to stand up for it.
To fight for it.
Speak out against injustice.
And hold those in power accountable.
And it all starts with understanding what happened on January 6th.
Why it happened.
And how to stop it from happening again.
And this report doesn't just tell us what went wrong.
Right. It also gives us ideas for how to fix things.
It's got specific recommendations for making our institutions stronger.
Protecting our elections.
And safeguarding our democracy.
It's like a roadmap for a better future.
A future that's more resilient.
More just.
And more democratic.
This deep dive into the January 6th report has been really eye-opening.
It's been a journey.
It's a reminder that our democracy is fragile.
We can't take it for granted.
We have to protect it.
It's been a look into a dark time in our history.
But also, hopefully, a chance to learn and grow.
To learn from our mistakes.
To make things better.
To build a better future for our country.
That's what we owe to ourselves.
To our fellow citizens.
And to future generations.
This report is something everyone should read.
It's a tough read, but it's worth it.
It's a chance to really understand what happened.
And to start thinking about how we can prevent it from happening again.
We need to keep talking about this.
Keep learning.
Keep pushing for change.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We encourage you to check out the full report for yourselves.
And keep the conversation going.
Until next time, stay curious.
Stay informed.
And stay engaged.